Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
And welcome back to Riff Worship. I am Arkansas's prodigal son, the Dill Bozer, Dylan Adams. And with me, as always, is Chicago's own greatest son, Austin Paulson. How you doing, bud?
I am neither of those things. I'm doing great. We are back once again for another week of Riff Worship, talking about all things the Riff. Why do we love the Riff? Why do we worship all things the Riff? We're in our third part of our cattle decapitation series. We were so much younger back then in the first part, so full of hope. And as these albums have progressed, it has just gotten bleaker and more depressing.
No hope.
Humanity is terrible, and we're all going to pay for it. And we'll certainly be talking about that in this episode. We'll be talking about Monolith of Inhumanity as well as the Anthropocene Extinction.
You got it, bud.
Wow, I did it. I was gearing myself up and trying.
That's a hard one.
Right. I'm gonna do it.
that is a really hard one to pronounce. I mean, you look at like their most recent record, which is Terracite, which is two words, and two words combined. And at least that's a little bit easier to pronounce than Anthropocene Extinction.
What's the Patrice O'Neill joke where it's like, if they had a gun to my mother's head and they asked me to spell something, I love you. Spell tomorrow. Ah, fuck. where's the M's in that fucking word? These are Bleak records. This was actually my first introduction into the band.
That being Monolith?
Monolith came out in 2012, May 8th of 2012. I think I had just graduated high school or was about to graduate high school. I was still kind of coming off of an era of my life that I would say was very close-minded. I only really liked older forms of music, older metal, older hardcore. I didn't really go past like a certain, era of music, I would say. I got into Municipal Waste, and that was kind of like the thing that helped push me into finding underground bands, finding some newer things that are pretty much doing the same things that I liked, maybe even better at some point.
Right.
And so I kind of stumbled upon Cattle Decapitation through a very infamous video I'm sure we'll be getting into in this episode. But that was my first introduction to this band, was this record in particular, Monolith of Inhumanity from 2012. This is their 7th full-length album. I guess I want to start by asking you, since you were already familiar with this band for quite some time by this point, you got in through the Harvest Floor?
Karma Bloody Karma.
Karma Bloody Karma.
Mm-hmm.
So going from Karma Bloody Karma, and then the Harvest Floor, and then Monolith, what were your thoughts on the record? Obviously some changes in lineup, changes in sounds even.
Yeah.
What was your first reaction when you heard this record?
I knew a new record was coming out. Obviously, like Metal Blade had they rolled out the wagon when it came to like pre-orders and everything. And I think this was during a period where I wasn't buying physical media. And I remember torrenting the album when it came out. I have since bought a copy, so I've made up for that. But I remember torrenting it, listening to it, and thinking, all right, this is a bit different. Me saying that this album is mid-tempo is a little ridiculous, because there are some just ghastly speeds on here on this record, but everything is so much more structured. Everything is so much more there's a reason for every part on this record. It definitely feels like songs were crafted in that manner, as opposed to, hey, here's these really rad parts we can create a song out of. This definitely felt more along the lines of here's a hook, here's a chorus, here's a vocal melody. Even funnier thing to say. But it definitely felt different. I don't know how it really hit me at first. I can't remember how it really hit me, but I just remember feeling like, well, this is different. And obviously it catches on. You latch onto the parts that go, oh, this is extremely different and this is unexpected for this band. I distinctly remember speaking to a mutual friend of ours during the period of time that this album came out, and I remember that person like going like, yeah, it's a sellout record. It's like, all right, this is funny. This is a extremely funny statement to hear about a fucking brutal death metal band. But it was different. This is a really, in comparison to the last record, kind of it's a very dry record in a sense of there's not a lot of crazy guitar overdubs. It's bass, drums, guitars, vocals. There's definitely some layering in it, but it definitely seemed almost like, all right, change of pace. Here's this more straightforward sounding record, but we're still progressing in the extreme manner, but we're bringing in more of these outside influences. I mean, in my listen to it, I hear like old school heavy metal riffs in it all over it. Like, there's a lot less like death metal riffs in it. It's more like old school metal, maybe even hard rock if you slowed the tempo down like 100 BPMs. There's even some kind of like no wave or new wave kind of like vocal influences all over this thing. Fields of Nephilim, like stuff like that. But it's a massive sounding record. It's a massive record, and the more you listen to it, the more you hear of it, and the more it kind of sticks with you. But it's the big thing to me that stuck out with this is that it's fucking bleak. There is no hope. I mean, those last two tracks on this album, which became kind of a calling card for this band, starting with the last record, was the last two tracks just set you up for a complete like mood change of where it was. But this might be their album with the most hits. It's death metal. Like, people saying death metal and hits together always gets a laugh, but it's like, hey, their known songs can be considered hits. Like, yeah, it wasn't a Billboard top 100 like charting single, but I mean, when you look at tracks like Forced Gender Reassignment and my favorite, which is one of my favorites, which is like a living, breathing piece of defecating meat. Your Disposal has a great vocal melody. Yeah,
that might be my favorite track on the record. Let's get into some of the lore here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, going from a record like The Harvest Lore to Monolith, there's definitely some changes. There's definitely more of a focus. I mean, if you can even say it is less chaotic, because as you mentioned, there is less weird kind of spastic parts, I guess, but there is also more songwriting. There is a progression in songwriting on this record, and I feel like that also has to do with their new producer, Dave Otero, who has since kind of remained their kind of go-to guy, maybe even like the fifth or sixth member of this band.
So Dave Otero, glad you mentioned him. He has a list of credits. Mm-hmm. I've got a couple of them kind of jotted down here that are big ones for him. Chemist, Primitive Man, The Canadian Awake, Cephalic Carnage, Archspire, and our favorite band, Allegion. He's produced all this stuff, and as well as stuff that I can't even list, and just because the list is so vast. But he's essentially become like their fifth member or sixth member at this point in time.
Right. Yeah. If you like throw in Wes Benskotter in there, it's a team. It takes a village. It's very much reminiscent of, when you watch like the Guar documentary, and there's like all of these other characters that kind of make the thing happen. You have like the four members at this point, and then Wes and Dave. And so you mentioned Cephalic Carnage. Mm-hmm. I feel like they're kind of the tie-in here with how Cattle Decapitation gets in touch with Dave, in that Dave pretty much produced their entire discography. I mean, they're both located in Colorado.
Yep.
They'd worked together for a long time. And then Cattle also being friends with Cephalic Carnage for forever. You know, they'd stop there on tour and stay with the band. And so that name, Dave Otero, is kind of always in the back of their mind getting mentioned. And so I think with this record, perhaps they wanted to do something different, you know. Not to say that the records that they did with Billy Anderson weren't great. They were. And I feel like he allowed the band to have some experimentation. I think there was a quote that said, you know, Billy's great, Billy's fun, but Dave's like not. And that was pretty much it. Like he whips him into shape, and you kind of need the person to go, yeah, that's stupid, I'm not going to do that. Like just brutal honesty to kind of help you rein in, or that take sucked.
Yeah. Do
it again.
There's kind of this joke that I've seen in some of the interviews about the record, or talking about different bands recording with Otero, and they basically talk about the back of his head a lot. They're like, oh yeah, the back of Otero's head or something like that. I'm sure that it's got to do with just like him not necessarily paying attention to all the silliness that's going on as much as like, hey, let's make sure this thing sounds rad. But yeah, I mean, they essentially went to Colorado. They've done that the last, let's see, from Monolith on to the most recent record. They've done that 4 records now. They've spent time there and have released one massive album after another. And it all started with this record that just, they wanted to do something different.
Yeah. And that's it. It does sound like there was from what I've researched, you know, with the Harvest Floor, I think they were kind of bored and wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
Then, all right, now there's like a clear statement in mind. There's something that you want to do, like progression, where this one was definitely like, fuck it, we're going to do exactly what we want to do. If nobody likes it, that's fine. We had a great run. We had an amazing career, amazing span of records. You know, I can't say that they'd, you know, listening back to some of the interviews and some of the kind of stories from this recording, it sounded like, you know, Travis has been on record saying like, I'd pretty much done everything that I wanted to do by this point. So if it didn't work out, that's fine. I did it. I can say that I did it. And, you know, luckily they succeeded in doing things the way they've always done, just by the beat of their own drum. And so you have Monolith. And so I think what really helps too is that maybe they had a little bit more time to sit with this record. I think they wrote it over the course of the year. I know it may have been hard to get together at certain points, so maybe the time spent together is not as much as a year, but perhaps maybe they had more time to write and construct this record than previous efforts. But yeah, so you essentially have a new producer. You also have a new bass player as well, Derek Engman,
who has gone on to play with Phil Anselmo and the Illegals. He has filled in for Rex Brown when he was ill for this recent Pantera reunion, you know, celebration, whatever we want to call that. He's filled in for him. I think the first time I saw him was playing with, I feel like he was playing in Neuraxis when I saw them open for Cannibal Corpse years ago.
Wow.
In Memphis at the New Daisy Theater. No, I'm sorry, not Neuraxis. Unmerciful was who he was playing for. He was playing guitar for them at that time.
Wow.
So that was the first time I'd seen him, and I didn't know it was the same guy when he joined the band. But yeah, you had a change in lineup, which always throws a little bit of kind of pushes the band to do a little bit more, as we saw with the Humanure record and as we saw with the Harvest Floor itself.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've got Josh Elmore returning. You know, he's not leaving. You have Dave McGraw's second record with the band, so you know you've got more Gravity Blast and all of that all over the record, which it definitely feels like those gravity rolls fit a lot more with some of the direction they're going on this record and the next record than maybe they did with the last one. But this is Derek's first album with the band. He is a fingerstyle player, which, you know, a lot of people like to debate, you know, what's better, one or the other. It's two different things. It's a tonally different things It depends what you're most comfortable with. I have recorded with guys that said, oh yeah, this type of music has to be played with a pick, or this type of music has to be played with fingers. And it's like, hey, I mean, you're wrong, but we're paying you, so I'm going to do what I want because we're paying you. So this is how it works. So he's definitely heard on this record. He's running a little bit of a cleaner signal, I think. And there's definitely a couple bass breaks on the record. You know, namely, the one that sticks out to me the most is, Forced Gender Reassignment has the bass break before the big slam part. And then I believe it is on Dead Set on Suicide. There's a quick bass break.
I believe that is correct. Yeah, they have like some sort of, I mean, I love that you can really hear it. I love they kind of have those parts where he's just able to kind of do a quick little run, a quick little bass line. It sounds wonderful. And even on the following record, there's definitely some really cool bass lines that follow.
We'll touch on that one with that record, because that thing is Otero's productions are always really well, but it was almost like he just stepped it up with that next record. That thing sounds like a tank rolling over your feet.
What I love about doing research for these two albums in particular is that they are more modern. So it's typically easier to find maybe some interviews online, as well as video content. The thing I also love about Metal Blade Records is that they often, or at least over the past like 10 years or so, have like a behind the scenes video compilation of their various, bands. You could watch like a ton of videos featuring Cannibal Corpse, recording with Eric Rutan. And then, so I feel like maybe this is the first time they're kind of doing that with Cattle Decapitation. So they have like videos of them out in Colorado in the snow. They are recording in like the dead of winter. It's like January, February. And it looks miserable outside.
Hey, we're real bored. We've been in the studio for a while. Let's go step out in like -4, just because change of pace. Sun's out, but yeah, we're dying.
They're doing interviews, and you could tell they're kind of standing outside, just kind of moving around as they're trying to give like a poignant answer to the question or something. But I love that. I love being able to see what maybe what the conditions or what the setting was like. Some of the you kind of see some of the later videos chronicling the recording for like Terrasite, and then you go back in time and look at this like very small little space, attempting to record their first record with Dave. So with this record, Dave's studio, of course, as we mentioned, is in Colorado. Flatline Audio, it's in Westminster. This kind of allows for a ton of guests to come through as well. As we mentioned,
my God.
Cephalic Carnage is on the first track. I love the name that they chose for it.
Oh, it's great. I have to get this out. Because one, the title, the Cephalic Carnage Community Men's Choir, which to me, I'm sure it's not, but is very much a throwback to the Type O records, where like there would always be a choir, and it was the Benson Hoist Lesbian Choir or something like that. But I don't know if you've ever heard this, because we've never really talked about Cephalic Carnage. No. But they've got two really, really great records that came out on Metal Blade Records. One being the Xenosapien record, and the other one being, I'm going to butcher it, hopefully I can get it right, Misled by Certainty. Those were both produced by Dave Otero, but they're known as Rocky Mountain Hydro Grind, which is hilarious because it mainly just alludes to the fact of like, these guys are high all the time. Great, fun, weird band.
That John Denver's full of shit, man. I suppose with that in mind, we should just get into some of the track list here. The first song, The Carbon Stampede, is a motherfucker. I love this song so much. What a great start to this record. You got some quick kind of atmosphere happening. And then maybe one of my favorite riffs on the record is basically just a hardcore riff. It sounds like a hardcore riff. Followed by a bass break, which we kind of mentioned. There's dissonant guitar chords and and sweeping. Josh Elmore's right hand is just chef's kiss, man. It's all over this record.
So with this record that we didn't necessarily have with the records prior is there's no intro. It just kicks.
It's just kind of there's a little bit of atmosphere to kind of like start it, but there's not like a humanure or you know, some of the older records or what you would get in the future. But yeah, for the most part, it's just kind of like a quick little atmospheric thing. I think even the following record has a little bit more, that ties into the artwork. But with this one, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, just a little ambience to kind of start the record.
And you hear the opening kind of muted chords of the Carbon Stampede, and it's big sounding, even through like, I don't know how you primarily listen to stuff, but I know I'll typically listen to it one of three ways, which is either through a Bose speaker, some noise canceling headphones, and usually the last option is the car. But I listen to it in those three ways because I can hear it differently each time. And the weight of the production and how the guitars are layered and how it's all moving in, it just sounds like a sledgehammer coming through the speakers.
Yeah, it's so strong. It's such a great way to open a record. Like I mentioned, that hardcore riff, I think they kind of play some variations on it throughout the song. You mentioned Gravity Blast. This song is full of them. They have this one little part too that I always found very interesting that kind of, it sounds like Demu Borgir or like Cradle of Filth. It's like this weird little keyboard part. It doesn't last longer than like a bar or two or something like that, but it's wonderful.
So it is, and it may be keyboards, but I know Josh during this period was using a Pog synth pedal for like kind of thickening the sound up a little bit. It could very well have been that as well.
Yeah, I wonder if, because I know some of the members, I think some of the members do play like keyboard on some later songs. Like I want to say Derek plays keyboard on the Monolith. There's obviously some other instrumentation that they do outside of, what they're known for on the record. Like, Travis himself does like electronics, atmospherics is what it's credited on the record, even some drumming. But yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of a weird sound, but it definitely kind of gave me that vibe that like almost, I don't know how you would like symphonic kind of, but it's like a quick little ditty. It's not very long. It's just kind of thrown in there. But it's such a culmination of all of these different influences and sounds that the various members of the band are into. And of course, then we have the just gang vocal heavy kind of outro to the song, which, as we mentioned, features members of Cephalic Carnage, including some older members of the band, Josh Mullen and Zach Joe. And then members of, I think all the members of Cattle Decapitation are also doing vocals in the studio, which you can see in that video behind the scenes, just a bunch of smelly metal dudes in a little room just yelling into a microphone, just cutting up.
Hey man, if you need stuff done in the studio and you got to save some money, who else is there to call but your buddies? Like, hey, we've got a little bit of a budget. We don't really want to like layer all of our voices. The guys in Cephalic are up the street. Like, let's just get them in here. I recorded them last week. I'm sure they'll come down.
We have the next song, Dead Set on Suicide, which
great track.
I it has
blood curdling.
It kind of just, a lot of these songs really just transition into one another. There's not really a point, maybe until like later in the record. For most of it, it is just like full speed ahead. It kind of just goes one into the other. And so you kind of have that Dave McGraw drum fill to kind of take us right into it. And then you mentioned a bass break. There definitely is. It kind of it was very reminiscent of like a Hammer Smash Face kind of like little boop.
I mean, it's quick.
Very unsettling sample as well in this song.
So that is a real sample. That is real.
Another one?
That's real. On this record, on this one in particular, that is a real audio sample of someone hanging. That is a legitimate sample. I don't know where it came from, but everything I've researched on this record was, oh yeah, that's real.
What was the other one that they did that on? It was it Homivore or was it another?
So it's Testicular Manslaughter. That's another sample of somebody actually being decapitated.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Hey man, it's all fun and games. So this album is just full of, I mean, this song in particular is chaotic. I mean, once that bass break kicks in, it's just gravity blast and just a wall of sound kicking in.
There's like one riff in particular where it just feels like it's stomping, like you're just like a world crumbling just riff that just keeps punching and punching. Definitely stuck out on this. You also mentioned earlier to start the episode, there was more of like a hard rock influence, perhaps.
Absolutely.
I feel like you hear that a lot on, especially on these two records in particular that we're discussing today. Josh Elmore's solo, his soloing feels very much, there's obviously the technicality to it. There's even all of the weird little techniques that he throws in there, all the little details. But I also feel like we've always discussed singable solos, and it has more of a kind of like hard rock kind of
it's got a quality
way about it, for sure. Yeah. Like it just doesn't, it feels like, all right, I know I can play all the sweeps and all the scales, but there is a kind of rock, kind of more like hooky kind of catchiness to the solos that he's kind of picking out. All the notes make sense in that way, I guess.
It sounds like everything was very well crafted on this record, but nothing was overthought, which typically leads to better crafted songs in my experience. So maybe that was the approach, was, hey, play from the gut, don't play from the brain, play from the gut and just kind of shoot from the hip. And maybe that's what, like, having a different producer helped with that, of like, hey man, like, you guys have written all this really great stuff. Shoot from the hip. Let's see what you got. Let's do it. That part doesn't need a hyper, sweepable solo that, sounds like descending into one of Dante's like pits. Go through, like, use your formal influences that you had growing up, and let's just see what you got. And you definitely get that on this record on a few songs. Yeah. In that. But this one in particular, you definitely get it. This is Dead Set on Suicide is an unsettling song. Sample aside, it's intense. You can definitely get a feel on this record just from the first two songs of, all right, this album sounds almost the polar opposite to the Harvest Floor, but you still get a couple little tidbits here and there where it goes, oh yeah, that's still happening. Those just chaotic, just wild parts are still happening, albeit there's more focus on, these great, just moshable parts. Yeah. There's more focus on hooks. There's more focus on, song structures, verse, chorus, verse, like that sort of thing. The old facade. But yeah, I stick to that. There's definitely some old school metal. Probably one of these dudes was listening to Accept at some point. There's some old school metal influence on this. It's just flavored with blast beats and like some of the best vocals you could get on a death metal record. We're going to touch further on that for sure.
Absolutely. Even this next song, you mentioned some of the influences. Like, I definitely know that there's like a traditional kind of metal influence on this record, but there's also like a ton of black metal influence on this record as well, especially with this next song.
So A Living, Breathing Piece of Defecating Meat is the next track. And before we get into the bulk of the song, the riff that leads into the chorus, that slide in riff that has like this kind of blackened chord progression on it, but it ultimately just sounds like bar chords, and it's crazy, and it leads into this wild hook that has these like tremolo pick double kicked parts under it, and it's just this great melody of like, it could only work in this style of music to have your melody line be a living, breathing piece of defecating meat. It could only work in like death metal or extreme metal of some sort. This song starts out with blast beats. Is that chorus melodic? Yeah, in a very atonal way. It's melodic. It for sure is melodic. It's melodic like, some Black Dahlia Murder like choruses are melodic. It's definitely more of a, okay, we're going to add this tuneful pitch to these vocals and let's do this. And I mean, you mentioned like black metal, like there's a lot of black metal inspired stuff on this record. And one honestly in the next song we're going to talk about. But I mean, this is the first instance of what you're going to get from the later era of this band. This is where those melodic vocals kick in, those tuneful vocals, and you see a lot more of that on Death Atlas and Terracite, but you also see a load of it on the next album, which is the Anthropocene Extinction. You've got guest vocals from Leonard Leal of Cephalic Carnage, who is the lead singer of Cephalic Carnage, who has his own kind of like wild vocal style as well. Cephalic Carnage has a track called Black Metal Sabbath, and they all wear these dumb masks when they do it. So like this very tongue in cheek when it comes to that, but like a very great like death grind kind of vocal styling. This track, again, another great track for this record. And since this was your first introduction to the band, I'm going to let you take the headway on this next track, because I want to know, one, was that the first track you ever heard from the band? And two, what was your initial response to seeing that video?
So I kind of mentioned this in the last video. I had a friend who is no longer with us, unfortunately. His name is Nick. And, you're in school and you do dumb things, and, you are looking to do things. You do things that you shouldn't be doing or looking at. And so when this video came out, I was kind of in this similar vein where, hey, I know you like metal. I think you would like this band, but you have to see this video. It's just fucked up. And I am, of course, talking about forced gender reassignment. And, much of my history with death metal has played out in a similar way, where something is being shown to me for the shock factor, or perhaps through someone who, like Cannibal Corpse. I remember someone showed it to me because Hammer Smash Face, like,
right.
What a ridiculous song title. That is like, it's funny, right? And I'm like, well, I kind of like it. And so I kept listening to death metal through that. It was just, but this was kind of shown to me in a very similar way. Wow, this is so shocking. You have to watch it.
Right.
Let's watch it together. And so the video that came out for the song was so graphic and so obscene that you could not watch it on YouTube. You couldn't even watch it on Vimeo. So you had to go to a horror news site, Bloody Disgusting, in order to watch it. And it is seared into my brain. Of course, the band had hired Mitch Massey to make a series of videos. He did one for Kingdom of Tyrants, which has like kind of a 9-minute, it's like a 9-minute mini film. It's very much reminiscent of like Ridley Scott. And,
yeah, there's a Tool kind of video vibe there.
Yep.
Very reminiscent to, there was a stop motion movie that came out a couple years ago called Mad Mad God.
Oh, I still need to see that. Damn.
Man, it is very reminiscent of that. When I watched that, I was like, oh, this is the Kingdom of Tyrants video. It's very unsettling.
Yeah. It's like the same guy who did the special effects for Jurassic Park and whatnot.
Yes, Star Wars, all sorts of stuff. But I kind of want to touch on, you mentioned the video, it was a shocking thing. And in the early to like mid 2000s, that was a big deal. I have seen some terrible shit on the internet as well as you have. I have seen One Man, One Jar. I've seen the Mr. Hands video. Like, I've seen all sorts of stuff. So I will say this though. This got pulled from YouTube and Vimeo almost immediately. Now, in 2000 and maybe 13, I remember logging on to YouTube and seeing something like, oh, a Serbian film. What is that? Some monster had put a Serbian film on YouTube, and I watched the whole thing. But yet I couldn't watch this video in there. There are things that will never leave my brain. This video doesn't do shit to me. but seeing that did. But yet YouTube, there's kind of a middle ground there, I guess. But back to the more important part of this song.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially an ode, I learned, to the infamous Westboro Baptist Church, who can get fucked. But, you know, you're basically doing an act to a group of people who are very ignorant and very, just, I don't even want to spend time talking about them. But yeah, obviously you can't really talk about the song without talking about the video. I think they even had a shirt at one point that featured like a still from the video on it. Like you could get a shirt with the not safe for work, basically, images on the thing. If you're walking around with that shirt, I don't even know. I mean, we have a friend who owned the Full of Hell, frickin' Chris Farley shirt at one point and would just walk to the grocery store with it with his child, not even thinking twice about it.
That's
but
such a terrible shirt.
I just couldn't imagine. Somebody definitely bought it for sure. But
I'm sure they sold out of it every tour stop.
The song itself, though, I mean, it's a slam riff.
Yep.
There's a really great bass break, and I mean the tone's impeccable on the bass. And then there's like, of course, some black metal high vocals as well as some dissonant black metal chords on this via Josh Elmore.
So at that point, I don't know how familiar you are with the video. I watched the video probably multiple times because I just had to show it to everybody.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember sitting at the Castle Punkenstein. I remember sitting there
R.I.P.
On the couch in the living room. Will is sitting next to me, our friend Will Cronenberger. Here's our obligatory Justin Swindle story. Will Cronenberger sitting next to me, and I can't remember who's sitting to my left. And like, I was like, oh, everyone's just got to see this. Everyone's having a good time. Click. Here's what we got to see. But at the point when the video gets the most extreme, that's when that black metal part kicks in and those high vocals soar. Basically, when the innie becomes an outie, like that's when the black metal part kicks in the video.
Sure.
And it's like, it's jarring. The song itself is jarring with the added perspective of a video going with it. I know the idea wasn't just to be a shock factor, but it was like, hey, here's this really fucked up group that deserves to catch as much shit as possible for who they are and what they support. Let's just let's have this really grotesque song. Let's also make this really grotesque video that just meshes really well with it. There was no shock factor. It was like, here's 5 fingers make a fist. That's essentially what it is. I mean, if there's one most memorable track on this album, just for a lot of reasons, not maybe just the melodies or anything, it's probably this one. When most people think of Cattle Decapitation, or if anybody thought of Cattle Decapitation, this track's probably going to come up top 5, I would say, of like things to listen to just initially. It's a hell of a track. I mean, it's catchy. It's catchy in the right spots. You've got musicality in there that adds to the impact of the song. The whole ending portion of the song is just a slam with deeper and deeper vocals.
His range on this record in general is just so, obviously we heard a little bit of what was possible on the previous record. Mm-hmm. Now you have some time to kind of work on that and hone those kind of higher pitched vocals and they really come through and shine on this record in particular. The next song, perhaps the first Cattle Decapitation love song.
I love the title of this track so much.
Gristle Liquor. Travis basically wrote it to prove that he could write a love song. And it just kind of deals with people's love for flesh.
So this is the track that starts out with the weird drum pattern with the phaser over it, right?
Yep.
And it's got that wild guitar line playing over it. That's very much like this weird hammer-on pull-off kind of riff.
Yeah, it kind of sounds. I know in the behind-the-scene video for the album, Josh shows a little bit of his pedal board that he's working with at the time, and maybe it's the Digitech Whammy. Like I think you have some like octave capability with that pedal.
Yeah.
So it sounds like some of that's going on. I can't be too sure, but
yeah, anything to kind of fill out the sound in a band with just essentially 3 members and a vocalist, like, yeah, you got to do what you got to do with that. Because I mean, there's even points on the record where you hear like a chord ring out and you can hear a really low tone under it. And I'm sure it's the whammy pedal just like shifted down an octave or something. This is a wild track. This is probably the closest to that kind of prior period of Cattle on the whole record. Right. This has a lot of that just chaotic shit everywhere, weird notes popping out. I mean, this is that song that there's a part in this song that's a throwback to one of the Harvest Floor tracks, which is that really fast gallop chugged part with the vocals kicking in. And it's like, that's absolutely insane.
Synced up, and it's so effective.
There's a lyric line in here that I'm sure, and it's towards the tail end of the song, and that's how I understood it was a love song, but it's something along the lines of like something comes out of my asshole, I feel like is what he says. I'm sure that's not it, but it is interpreted that way, and it's like perfect.
I love it. There's some great the lines on this record. The one in particular that makes me think it's in the chorus because it's repeated a little bit throughout the song. I am become death, the destroyer of all, or sometimes it's the destroyer of humans. And it's so hateful. It is just so entirely hateful. This song also kind of ends with some like unsettling ambience as it transitions into our next song, Projectile Ovulation.
Man, this is probably my favorite song on the record.
Yes, okay.
I have made many an Instagram video of me cooking food with the gurgle part of this song playing because this is such a rad fucking track for a lot of reasons. I mean, I can hear the song kick in my head, and it's just like it kicks in, it just kicks right the fuck in. And not only is it just a balls ass heavy track, but you've got a former vocalist of the Texas-based slam band Devourment on it, Mike Majewski, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And there's a point where their vocals kick in and his come in first, and they're already this like illegible sound. But when you really listen to it, you can actually hear him trading back and forth with Travis doing this low parts. Then there's one part where they're actually layered on top of each other. And it's the most obnoxious, just like alien pig sounding thing you could even imagine. Go Hogs. Woo! And it's like, God, I love this track. The title is fantastic. You know, it makes me purely think of like, what if the animals fought back? And like, I just picture like a fleet of bovine at like a slaughterhouse, just like, all right, motherfuckers, like, oh, you want to stick that in me? Like, I'm going to fire one back at you. Here's what we got. It's like when good cops go bad, damn. Like this track is this is where it goes off the rails with me. When I heard those vocals like layered like that for the first time, I went, all right, it's done. Nothing can like out like gurgle this or like frog noise this. Like this is beautiful.
The next track in particular is a pretty standout song for me on the record.
Man, Lifestalker.
It has all of that black metal influence on it. There's at one point where he just straight up sounds like he's spitting into the mic, which I did see in some behind the scene things. I don't know if it's for this track in particular. The water. He's basically hovering over like
a pile
of his laundry, and he's just spitting, by the mic. But it definitely sounds like he's, that blah, like it's coming like just directly from the back of his throat. You have some black metal chords, which kind of have a bit of a groove to them as well. And it all transitions through this bass line into this very huge, epic sounding chorus and solo. It's just massive sounding.
Very post-metal-esque, very like Isis, Neurosis.
Yes.
Very big and bombastic even part there. That is the first, there's definitely aspects of this record that you see on Terracite and Death Atlas. This is the first instance of like, oh shit, this band could go to the directions we did see with Death Atlas and Terracite. And that's the moment. Like the melodic vocals coming in, yep, you get that on every record, but this is the first time you hear this like, oh, here's this thing that this band could do. They're not just like a brutal death metal band.
You have a few more moments on this on the record. Getting into a few more tracks, Do Not Resuscitate, Your Disposal. That's probably my favorite track on the record, as I mentioned. This is the
I don't want to gloss over Do Not Resuscitate too much. That is probably, I think that track gets kind of buried just because there's so much going on in all the other tracks. This is probably the most straightforward track on the whole record. It's really fun. I mean, it is definitely a just kind of dyed in the wool, just really fucking heavy grind song with a lot of hardcore aspects to it. I mean, more bass breaks in the song. Like this, it's a rad song. It gets a little buried because of where it falls on the record, because it's literally falling before the last 3 tracks, which are, in my opinion, probably some of the better tracks on the whole record.
I agree. Absolutely. The next track definitely stands as my favorite.
Man.
Your Disposal. It's the one track on the entire album, from what I understand, to not have any lyrics by the time they entered in the studio. Travis had no lyrics for the song and basically had to write it during the recording process. You kind of have a return to the higher pitched vocal chorus we heard on Life Stalker.
Yep.
And then you have a really amazing black metal breakdown, which, when you hear it the first time, it kind of it switches so abruptly.
Yep.
But I think it's not out of place when you hear it. It's just kind of a testament to this band, their ability to kind of switch on a dime and just kind of go down a path of like, here's a completely other influence on this song. It makes sense. It fits so smoothly, and then cut back to kind of the more death metal, death grind that they're known for on this song.
This is, you touched on it on one of the earlier tracks, probably from the Carbon Stampede to Dead Set on Suicide. The tracks transition really well into the next one. It's not just like tracks over, next track. They flow. There's a really good flow to this. And this song in particular feels like if there would, now this would have been the track released as a single.
Yeah. No kidding.
Because it has the catchiest chorus on the whole album. The absolutely catchiest chorus. Like, yeah, it's arguable that a living, breathing piece of defecating meat could have done that, but the lyrics to that are just so like, okay, they're we get it. The human race is bad, like all understood. But this one could have, this track can almost be, interpreted by a wider audience for, multiple things. I may interpret the song differently than you would, and John Smith and like Mary Jo Who's It may like accept it as something else. This could be They're More Than a Feeling or something, going back to high school underneath the bleachers, you know what goes on. Like, yeah, I'm getting pushed off the bleachers, like that kind of thing.
You all right, bud?
No, never.
All right, good.
Never. I'm good. Damn. Trauma.
I like the thing you brought up about the transition though, where most of the record does kind of either there's like a fill that carries it into the next track, or it's just kind of, all right, done, on to the next one, let's go. It's kind of nonstop. Whereas this riff kind of almost just fades off, like it's being played forever. Yeah, it could go on forever. Probably still, some say it's still being played to this very day, but it kind of fades out and transitions into this another kind of like atmospheric, kind of more unsettling noise track on the Monolith.
Here we go.
When you go in there, everything just sounds so big and weighty. There's like a fire burning, maybe somebody digging, and maybe it's raining. I'm not really sure, but it kind of feels reminiscent of what would be kind of included on records like Death Atlas. There's like that like long form video. It feels like a statement that will be kind of used again on preceding records. You mentioned Neurosis. It feels like a Neurosis track.
It does. It's very post metal, very post rock, very depressing kind of black metal aspect to that. It's very reminiscent of the last of the tracks from the Harvest Floor. which I can't remember the name of the track that leads into Regret in the Grave, but it's the Jarbo track with all of the choral vocal arrangements and everything. This very bleak sounding, almost setup for what will become one of the most obnoxiously heavy tracks on the whole album. And man, does the Monolith set up for this monster, which is Kingdom of Tyrants. This thing has that great epic video we alluded to earlier to it. But man, this thing starts out aggressive and it doesn't let up. It's bleak. The video matches the atmosphere of the song. I mean, it is, as you touched on, big riffs, big vibes, and just massively epic. I know that word gets used a lot when it comes to like these big sounding, songs, but it very much is an epic track.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it really is just kind of like you said, it's an end statement. It's a culmination of everything you've heard on the record, from the moment you turn it on to the 43 minutes in. This is like, here's everything we got, done. It's over. This is a kind of a standout track to me in that you essentially have a song to end the record that's written by a new member, the bass player Derek, as well as Travis, who's more or less really responsible for the lyrical content and the melody, but I think he also had a few riffs lying around that he would, lend to this track as well. So that's kind of a neat little tidbit there. Definitely some black metal high vocals on this as well. It's just a strong way to end the record. It really is.
I mean, I will give this band all the credit in the world for how they structure their records and how they're paced and how the songs are placed on the record. But what they do really well is they end their records really well. And I think since the Harvest Floor, each record has had this great ending that almost alludes to the record of what's to come. And it just keeps going with that. Even Terracite kind of ends that way with who knows what we're going to get with the next go around with this band. I mean, you just sat through 43 minutes, 44, 45 minutes of some of the most intense death metal that became a classic record, that became a really big record for the band.
I mean, essentially like a second career, really, for the band.
Second wind. I believe Travis described it as his band caught a second wind with this album. And you just went through that whole 45-minute period and you get to the last track and here's the culmination of everything on the record. This is the kind of crowning achievement of this record is this song. And man, it doesn't let up. It doesn't. This song ends the way it begins. And it's nuts. I mean, they did great things with this album. They toured their asses off. It's bonkers to think that a band that already was really good, and had already put out these just really great death grind records and death metal records could come out and go, all right, we're just going to completely, do a 180 and we're going to put out something that if you guys like it, great, but we're doing it just for us. I don't want to forget about it because typically we like to add in that if a band's got like bonus tracks or B-sides or anything, but this one's got a pretty cool bonus track to it.
Yeah, it actually appeared initially only on the Japanese edition of the record, an exposition of insides.
Mm-hmm.
And so you essentially have the album. I think the song probably later appeared on YouTube. And so then you get a bunch of fans going, wait, I've never heard this song before. What's going on? Like, where was this? And so I think there was just an influx of fans who were kind of, how can I get this song? How can I own it? And so then I want to say Cattle essentially would release a kind of 7-inch single version of Your Disposal in the summer of 2013 with this song as the B-side. It's fine. It's a great track. It's very straightforward. Kind of gives me like Human Remains vibes with some of like the weird guitar playing as well. I'm going to use that probably to death throughout the rest of us doing this show. But I love Human Remains. And so if you're weird, you're just Human Remains to me, I guess.
You are Human Remains. There was the compilation that came out a few years ago called Medium Rarities.
That's
that
right.
I'm pretty certain this track was on as well.
Yeah, that it was like 2018. It features like demos and like you said, rarities and whatnot. And so this song does make an appearance on that comp. It's good. I don't, honestly, I don't know where this would have been placed in the sequencing of the record had it come out. If it was just at the end, I feel like it would be kind of it seems kind of weird that
takes away from the impact of the full record.
So I'm sure it would have been a little different, but I would say that it's cool to have if you have the 7-inch or if you have the comp. Obviously, I always love the little extra things to kind of dive in with this band. But as far as the record stands with its 43-minute runtime, the songs that are on there, I think it's perfect. We have to talk about the artwork, of course.
So again, returning Wes Ben Scotter.
Of course.
At this point in the band's career, he's the 5th or 6th member.
Yep.
This is obviously like the artwork is very striking on this record, even more so than the albums that came before it. I mean, you've got that ape humanoid hybrid on the front, like with, I believe his scalp is ripped. His clothes are ripped. You've got the monolith behind him. You've got, I even think there's some tie-ins on the backside of the album to the Harvest Floor.
I've heard that as well. I think these, I guess the Harvest Floor and the 2 records we're talking about today kind of have some like weird little Easter eggs in the artwork, just kind of connecting all 3. But yeah, it's like essentially the end result of the de-evolution of man, basically saying like, here, if you keep going the way you're going, this is essentially what's going to happen. We told you so. Y'all fucked up pretty bad.
Hey man, this band is prophesizing shit, and when we touch on Death Atlas, that's going to get real close.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the Monolith, basically like 2001 Space Odyssey vibes. You can't really shy away from that. But I mean, this band has a strong stance. I mean, obviously we're polluting our environment. We're there's overconsumption and lack of environmental awareness. Like people just don't care. We'll just do whatever.
Yep, people don't give a shit. And then you got bands like this that are like, we know you don't give a shit. We're gonna make fun of you. We're gonna give you shit. And to think this is an 11-year-old album, almost 12-year-old record. People still don't give a shit.
Yeah,
about it.
But I'm glad we still get records kind of ripping those people apart. So
I am so glad that there is a subgenre of music that just goes like, those people we don't like, we're gonna rip their heads off. We're gonna let apes eat them, that kind of thing.
Speaking of art on this record as well, I love obviously the Wes Ben Scotter album artwork. I love even the albums that came after it. But one thing in particular that really stood out to me about this record in particular was they kind of got the talents of Tom Bunk. Now, if you are not familiar with Tom Bunk, he is best known for his work with the Garbage Pail Kids during the 80s.
Did he do the movie? That's all I need to know.
I don't think many of those people, because I don't think that transitioned well from, the actual original IP to the, it's like all those movies that kind of have like blankety blank the movie or so-and-so the movie. They usually sucked ass.
Oh my God.
But you essentially did get the guy who made a good bit of the trading cards, probably known for creating some of the artwork with some of those disgusting children on the cover. He also worked for Mad Magazine. And so what they essentially did was hired him to create artwork for each individual member. I think there's even like an extra little tinfoil card, but you have like 5 trading cards that came with the album, depending on like the pre-order you got. Mm-hmm. It also came with the t-shirt. But yeah, and then I think you get it in like a special cattle decapitation recycling bin, which is amazing.
I would love to like see those cards show up again. Just like someone just like has them in their collections. Like, hey, I want to see this stuff because, I don't think many people are like, you know what? I could be wrong. I'm sure there's a lot of people like you and I that will hold on to shit. Like I used Dying Fetus came out with a record in 2017 called The Wrong One to Fuck With.
Yeah.
And one of the pre-orders came with a fucking pocket knife that said that on it.
Yep.
I used that till about 3 weeks ago and it just fell apart in my hands.
Oh no. Hey, well,
And
that's a good run.
I was like, damn, can I find another one of these? Like, I'm just a sucker for ignorant band merch.
I think Full of Hell also had like a pocket knife thing too, or whatever.
I've seen a few bands do like, I may have seen a band on tour that did stilettos one time.
You really?
Like, I'm pretty certain, like, I don't know how they were moving those things, but I am pretty certain I saw some like warped band merch. But
love it.
These guys are clearly fans of really, like, I'm sure they're fans of horror movies, horror novels, any of the weird 80s, like, gross stuff, which was very prevalent in that period. I mean, like the Toxic Avenger, trauma films, all that stuff. I'm sure these guys were fans and actually absolutely loved getting that tie-in with this record, with the Garbage Pail Kids. I mean, now they're essentially in that universe.
No question.
When merch is fun, it's great. When merch is dumb and just stupid, like, it's the absolute worst. I mean, there's nothing better than like looking at like a Gwar t-shirt and just going like, God, that is the most ludicrous thing. I got to have it. But then you can look at some other band and you're like, it just looks like a Champion hoodie. Like, all right, whatever. Like, give me some ingenuity. Give me some fun shit.
So you have the merch, you have the physical copies of the record, you have the music videos, you have the record itself, which is just a monster. What is the reception? What do people think? Well, this was obviously very critically acclaimed. We're talking about it today. It sold 24,000 copies in the United States during its first week of release. Ended up on a lot of top like record lists of that year. I mean, there were like Metal Sucks used to do like a kind of top records of the year chosen by different artists. A lot of them picked this record. Dave Davidson of Revocation, Wretched, I think Murder Contract, which I also believe that Travis Ryan's in as well.
He
right?
sure is.
Yeah,
He was. Murder Construct records were rad. That was like pure death grind. Had a couple of the dudes from Exhumed, Intronaut in it, a bunch of like California guys. Those records are rad. If you've never listened to those in particular, you should check them out. They're real quick records. They may be like 25, 30 minutes tops.
They also toured pretty heavily after the release of this year. They were on the 7th annual Summer Slaughter tour, which featured other bands like Dillinger Escape Plan, Animals as Leaders, Periphery, Normagene, The Ocean, Revocation, Rings of Saturn, and a few others. But they also went on a few tours. They were on, we mentioned Dying Fetus, and Cerebral Bore. That they were on a leg of the tour for that. And then you also had the, I guess, infamous 6 Feet Under and Wretched tour that they were a part of as well.
They sure were. I'm just going to say that. Just go online, look that shit up. I'm not going to dig into it. I don't know enough about it. I remember reading about it. I'm just going to say this. Brian Slagle is probably a very patient man and a very good man.
He's a very good buddy.
But what's great is in experiences like that, when you go on tour, I'm sure you take that and you internalize it and go, you know what? We're going to move past that and we're just not going to handle ourselves that way. And we're going to move forward and better ourselves from it. And, we talk about how well this record did, what it did on Billboard. It was one of their first albums that hit like the Heat Seekers charts. It hit number 6 on the Heat Seekers album charts. But with all of the hype from this record and the success from this record, it helped lead into the next album, which was the Anthropocene Extinction, which I want to touch on. That was the first album by the band that hit the Billboard Top 200. So Crazy. It shows that Monolith helped push the next record even farther. And it just shows that a death grind band from California that started out as just like, let's play carcass riffs, could turn into this like, no pun intended, but this monolith of a band that can put out very, very contemporary death metal records from a subgenre that a lot of people thought had like a glass ceiling. And it's bands like this that prove that glass ceiling has been shattered many years over. But now we get to sink into the waters of the Anthropocene extinction.
Yeah. You just love goofing, don't
man.
you?
If I can tie a pun into it, shit is gonna happen.
So yes, a couple years pass by, and then you have this next record, their 8th studio album, the Anthropocene Extinction, released August 7th, 2015. Damn near 20 years as a band at this point, which again is just such a marvel in itself. All the things that you have just said about, this band essentially starting as kind of a side project and exploding to a chart-topping, death grind band from San Diego. It's practically unheard of in extreme music, really. I mean, even in the present day, we're knocking the door of 30 years at this point.
Yeah,
and for
absolutely.
them to continue to operate and perform at the level with the touring and the recording, it's such an amazing thing, and it's essentially why we are talking about this band over the course of this multi-episode series on the band. But again, I guess I have to ask, and I will start this by saying I do believe by this point we knew each other pretty well.
Yep.
I want to say that I was over at your house, and I remember this record coming in the mail when you got it and you opened it up.
Man, you got a good memory.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, this is a weird record for me. This came out in 2015. So I remember anytime I've always had my phone on me at work, and anytime that a record would come out, we've alluded to this in different episodes before, that anytime a record would come out that I would want, I would always have a timer set for it. So like I would always like I'd always like step into the bathroom or something, like scroll through, and I'd see that, and I jumped on the pre-order for this. I distinctly remember having a timer set for this one, and I also remember when that second Noisem record came out, you and I were like, it's up.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember this, but the reason this record sits with me so well, and there's probably a reason I didn't listen to this record as much as I did during this period of time, was I believe the album pre-orders dropped the day I found out my dad was ill with cancer. So I remember being at work, getting the album, and getting the phone call within like 35 minutes. So 2015 was a weird year for me. But this record, when I did finally, it was months before I got a chance to listen to this record, so I really missed it upon impact. But when I finally went back and listened to it, it was like I heard the water kick in on the opening track, and it just like, all right, here we go. Let's see what this does. Let's see what's going to happen. What I didn't know is it set the precedent of a very dark, bleak, heavy record. Like the vibe, like I touched on the production for Monolith. That thing hits really hard, but this thing hits like a megaton.
Yeah.
It just rolls out. I mean, this album rolls out hard. I don't want to get into the tracks just yet because I know we're going to dig in deep with all of those. But I just remember when I finally got a chance to listen to this, it was like, oh my God. Tracks like Clandestine Way, Crocodile Rot, which is a great joke about the whole crocodile drug coming out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what a fucking record. What a great follow-up. I feel like the band was firing on all cylinders with this one. I feel like what they did on Monolith, they just went like, let's do more of that, but let's add these other elements to it that we have.
What do we like about Monolith? Let's take that and evolve. Let's perfect it. Let's hone it in a little bit. And like you said, they came in prepared. Whereas the last record, there was like a song, or maybe it's not that they weren't prepared, but there were some things where like, all right, we didn't have this completely written, or there were some things that we still needed to work out. This was, we were prepared. We were ready to go. We had already had the experience of working with someone like Dave Otero. So we kind of worked out those kinks of like, all right, it's not really new again. We know how this process works. We're used to it. Let's go back. And now you're able to like really kind of dive in deep with the dynamics of working together as a band, but also working with a producer who also essentially works, as we mentioned, as like another member of the band. He's not just there kind of making sure the red light's on. He's also telling you what stinks, how you should maybe arrange certain songs, like maybe don't do this. You know, again, there's that sort of like input being addressed here on this record as well.
You need a producer that can help you put out and help you create the best product you can, right? It's obvious that even some bands have allowed producers writing credits in a sense. But you need somebody that's going to go, hey, I know what you guys are capable of. Let's do this. You know, it's arguable that Bob Rock helped Metallica, but he did help them become the biggest band on the planet with the album he recorded with them and helped put out. But he distinctly said when they approached him about recording post Injustice, this was the biggest the band had ever been. He had said, every record you guys have put out does not give you a representation of what you guys do live. And I want a representation of that. But you need guys like him. You need guys like Dave Otero that can go, hey, you know what? That part doesn't make sense to be there. Maybe you should play that part for 4 bars rather than 8. Maybe you should play that riff you should play it in a higher key, or you should play it in a lower key, anything like that. Just suggestions. He's not saying, ultimately he knows that it's the artist's choice to do whatever they want to do. He's just going, hey, maybe if you do it this way, maybe if you do it this way, just suggestions.
There's always another way to do something. And kind of with the dynamics of the group, you know, these are all very different people. These are all guys who are into different things, different ages, different backgrounds.
Yep.
And so you have a lot of different influences. And I would imagine that can be kind of difficult to kind of work together when you maybe think it should sound one way or it should sound another way. But I think this band does a really good job, as far as, Dave kind of has said on record, basically, that they all do a very good job of kind of coming together with their all different tastes and different influences and styles and kind of making it into one unique thing.
And, where that is a great benefit to a band, that can also be a detriment as well, because sometimes those resentments can build up. As we see, there's a bit of a lineup shift after this record.
Mm-hmm.
And, we don't know what went on there. There's no reason to dig into that at all, because we weren't there. But it's obvious that you can have people that have 4 different viewpoints that can work really well together because you get different perspectives. Mm-hmm. But you can also have a little bit of resentment, a little bit of anguish, a little bit of frustration from something like that from time to time. But I digress. What you've got from this album is probably the most black metal influenced record this band's probably ever done. I mean, it might as well be a black and death grind band at this point on this album. You've got some oceanic feels on this album, like from the artwork to the way the songs sound to the intro itself.
The album artwork, again, it really ties into that first song, but you're essentially, you got that record in your hand that first day.
Yep.
You see, essentially just bodies on a beach washed up on the shore with, plastic kind of flowing out of their
Legos.
It does. What's that Cronenberg movie that came out? Kind of reminded me of.
Which one? I mean, there's shit falling out of people's bodies and all of them.
There's a recent David
Crimes of the Future?
Yeah. No, is it Crimes of the Future? Yeah, I think so. Right.
With Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah. So everybody's like eating plastic just because we've essentially,
that's
fucked up our evolution or whatever. And so that's essentially what we have here, is that we've polluted our oceans so much with, garbage that, life forms, animals kind of mistake it for food. And, they've seen where, these animals will wash up on shore and they're like, oh, well, now they're decomposing and you see that they've like eaten plastic. And so we're destroying the environment that way. But of course, with the nature of this band, you flip the tables and now you have human beings washed up on shore with like Coke cans just spilling out of them.
There's some great tie-in photos on the inner sleeve of the album of all of the band members like washed up on shore, like dissolving and like breaking down as well. You know, we're going to touch on Wes Benscoter on the back half of this portion, but again, he just hits it out of the park with design, everything. I think between this record and Death Atlas, which we're going to touch on in the coming episode, on these two albums in particular, Wes Benscoter hit it out of the park with getting the vibe of the record with the artwork matched perfectly.
Yep.
Not that he did a poor job on any other records that he's done, but for whatever reason, those two in particular just hit it home.
You certainly get the feeling of the album artwork on the first song we hear, Manufactured
God.
Extinct. It's waves crashing. It's another kind of ambient intro. There's atmosphere, but it really just kind of transports you to that really grim, bleak cover on the record. It is another massive start to the record. What a way to start an album with this song. You have just absolutely pummeling chords, just the lowest of the lowest death growls on the song. And then you also have a kind of to show that range again. You have a return to form with the melodic highs that you would hear early into the record. So really, what a strong way to start.
He being Travis Ryan sounds really good on this opening track.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good. You get the waves crashing, you get those big thudding drums and all of that just kicking in. And you hear those like twinkly black metal arpeggiated like notes from a chord. And it's just, all right, this is Norway, west of San Francisco here. It is a massive sounding track. We're going to use that word a lot in this podcast. But this is a big, big, big sounding track to open up an album with. Between the death growls that are building into it, the big pummeling sound of the whole song itself. You've got Josh Elmore, stomping all over this thing too, with like solos and riffs just all over this thing. They were firing on all cylinders on this track. They came off a really successful album. They knew they had to follow it up with something. And it's like, all right, this is what do we follow it up with? Is it gonna be as good as the last record? Is it gonna be better than the last record? Is it gonna be the same record? What do we add differently to it? And all of that's cast aside on your first listen to this first track. And you go, yep, whatever happened on Monolith is still there, but we've got an added element to it. You've definitely got more of a blackened vibe to it. And it's all, it's a death metal band, but it is all over that first track. It is an unstoppable track.
Even the next one, Prophets of Lost, which also has a music video as well.
Yep. And that great spoken intro. Who could that be?
Well,
who could that deep voice be?
A little group earlier, kind of another tie-in here. But yeah, you have Phil Anselmo of Pantera on just kind of this like narrated spoken word, a few lines recited on this song in particular.
He retches up into a kind of like a blackened thing right at the tail end of it before Travis's vocals kick in too.
But if you want to have someone who has that like just gravelly voice to kind of get a point across, you probably aren't doing you're probably not doing anything wrong getting Phil on your track, I suppose. Definitely more black metal inspired arrangements and vocal styles on this. I felt like I was hearing some Abbott-esque like gurgles at times for sure. And then it's mixed with some more of those melodic high pitched vocals as well. Definitely a standout song on the track. And then there's like a huge breakdown kind of towards the end of the song as well.
Someone in this band really likes goth music or new wave music of some sort, because it really shows on this record. It really shows on this record a lot. There's definitely some like post-punk. There's definitely some of the, as you've said, the no wave stuff. Like what was Johnny Rotten's band after the Sex Pistols? Public Image Limited.
Mm-hmm.
Like stuff in that vein. Maybe some like Nick Cave, like Birthday Party stuff. It's on there. Some of these guys listen to that stuff, I'm certain.
You'll certainly get some more experimentation on the next song too, like Plagueborn.
Oh, Author and Punisher.
Yeah, it it feels like an industrial track, right?
Mhm.
There's some programming done by none other than Tristan Schoen.
The opening is like the drum machine, the sampler.
It's great. If you haven't checked out some of his work, that is some also very bleak, just very abrasive music. I mean, he designs everything himself from, some of his programming and his instruments that he uses, his tools. I think he just designs everything in CAD and then like 3D print stuff. So really, really cool stuff. And I want to say that I had not heard of Author and Punisher by this point, by the time this record came out. So the fact that they were kind of hip to what some of the stuff he was doing and got him to play on a record is also super cool. I really, really, really like that. You also get some more, I don't know. There's like a dual growl thing they do with some of the like the deeper like death metal vocals with the melodic highs. There's some like it's kind of it's a mostly slower mid-pace song. You got some like arpeggiated chords like halfway through, but this is a cool track. If not alone for just the Author and Punisher guest spot there.
So the whole album definitely has a little bit more of a mid-tempo kind of feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely feels like it fits the vibe of like this depressing, blackened vibe to it. There's some hyper fast shit on this album, but overall, even that fits into the scope of this very kind of mid-tempo kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Then you go to what is my favorite track on the album, which is Clandestine Ways, Crocodile Rot, which is just a great single. There's a video for the song.
That's that Elton John track, right?
That is that Elton John track.
Yeah.
This is a pit track. If this band had a pit track, this is it. This is the song that like I'm sure like heads are getting bashed into or anything like that. This is that track on the album. I mean, you've got bass breaks in this album. That's one thing I wanted to touch on is the bass tone on this record has a little bit more distortion on the top end of it, but the bass is extremely audible throughout the whole album, and it adds to the overall mix. This is an extremely well mixed record.
There's a particular bass part in towards the end of the record that I'll definitely be getting into, but you're not wrong, man. I mean, it's audible, it's clear, it's not, it doesn't divert your attention anywhere, but everything is just it's there in the mix. He did a great job making sure everyone was heard and everything was just laid right there super well for everyone to hear.
Again, another track with a great Josh Elmore solo in it. This is, he's the pitch hitter of the band. We can talk about the vocals all day long, and we will continue to talk about that. But Josh deserves to get a lot of credit for taking this band to where it has and becoming the guitar player of this band.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume, if not the primary songwriter, one of the primary songwriters in the group. There's no way you can have some of these tracks that you've got now, like Clandestine Ways or even Plagueborn, without him being in the band. There's no way. Again, there's still on the album, there's still that like old school heavy metal vibe of some of the guitar riffs, but you have that black metal kind of influence all over all of it. And it's definitely more second wave black metal than maybe first wave. It's less Celtic Frost, maybe more Emperor, maybe more Immortal in that sense. And it's definitely all over this fucking record. And it just, again, we decided to do these two albums together, Monolith and Anthropocene, because they're so close in just sonic scope, but even the songwriting is still very, very, very similar. It's almost a 1-2 punch. And sometimes I feel like this record gets a little buried because of Monolith being what it is, and then the long wait in between Anthropocene and Death Atlas and the way it was released. This one kind of gets buried a little bit. But man, the songwriting is second to none on this fucking album.
It's wonderful. You have another track. How do you pronounce that? I guess. How would you pronounce it?
Man, it's like that Disco Volante album by Mr. Bungle, right? Circo Inhumantis. we're gonna say that.
Okay.
It's like a praying mantis. Again, another drum fill intro.
Yeah, drum fill intro. Dave McGraw, he's, really another guy who came in later and really has outdone himself with each record. Great song. It was pretty straightforward to me. There's a really cool breakdown halfway through. The interesting part, kind of around this part of the record, is almost like a transitional, instrumental. It's like an ambient atmospheric track again.
Yep.
There's a little bit of noise. The Burden of 7 Billion. I when I heard it, I thought it sounded like John Carpenter meets the Gargoyles theme.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was just like, oh yeah. But
Xanatos.
it kind of brings, the first and, I guess second part of the record together to me.
I could see that, because then you really get into, the final portion of the record, and it is, or the second half, I should say. You get into the second half of the record, and it's same vibes there, but the tracks become far more intense.
Yes. Starting with Mammals in Babylon.
Oh my God.
Black metal influence all over this track, really. And this was a song in particular where I was like, oh, there's that bass.
Yeah.
There's that bass. I hear you. There's a really cool effect, and they've done this a couple times, especially on later records, where it almost feels like the sound in the room is being sucked up. There's silence, and then it just spits right back out. It's so intense and so impactful. I love when they do that, and I feel like you can definitely hear that on a record like Death Atlas or something like that. But again, you really have a catchy melodic chorus on this. There's the dissonant black metal chords, which is so weird to say in itself. It's like, oh, it's very catchy, but it's also dissonant as fuck.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just shows like you can be catchy and have hooks in, the most like bleak, dissonant sounding music. I mean, you look at what would be a really dissonant band. Even some of like the Mr. Bungle stuff, which is not necessarily dissonant at later periods, but the very first record is a dissonant record.
It's a challenging record.
I mean, it's a challenging record, and this is far less challenging than that. This is just more abrasive.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still get all of that. You can still get that catchiness. You can still get hooks. You can still get all of that melody over a dissonant melody. Not everything has to be like a 1-4-5 chord, guitar harmony or a guitar melody. Not everything has to be like 4-chord rock. Like you can do this and still have these great catchy hooky songs.
Yeah.
Mutual Assured Destruction. This is one of my best friends, Will's, favorite track on the whole record. He's a big fan of this record over Monolith because he swears that the lyrical prowess on this record just stomps all over Monolith. I think the lyrics in both are fantastic. There's a slam riff in this song at the tail end that is just like chef's kiss. It is literally the icing on the cake. It is, it's the coon dog on the supper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure,
I don't know what that means. I just felt like saying it.
Someone told me the other day, you're trying to ride 2 bicycles with one ass. I'm like, probably, I guess. Is that good?
Wait,
is it bad?
Is that like the monkey in the football bit? I mean, it's got to be very similar.
It's damn near close to it.
You're trying. That's like that thing I heard at work recently, and I told you about it. We're going to segue off to this, and I hope we keep this in here. I was listening to a podcast, and somebody on there insulted a woman by saying she was so ugly she could stop bird shit midair. And I went to work the next day, and some old codger, I will not disclose where I work, but some old codger was in this room, and there was a bunch of other old codgers in there grumbling about something, and they saw someone or somebody on TV and said the exact same phrase, and I just stopped.
Jeez.
Like mid-step. And went, all right, I got to go.
I love that. It's like when you learn a new, they always say when you learn a new word for the first time, it was
you hear it everywhere.
Maybe always there, but now it sticks out to you. That's hilarious, dude.
But back to the task at hand. Mutual Assured Destruction. Great fucking track. hits all the right points, moshy, heavy, great song structure, it hits the point fucking home.
Yeah. I mean, even the next few tracks, I mean, Not Suitable for Life, Apex Blasphemy.
Another dissonant song.
Dissonant, yet very catchy. I mean, it's just a really, we're kind of building again, right? We're getting to that crescendo of like all of these different songs. And then you get into the second to last track on the album.
Yep.
Ave Exitum? Or Abe?
Sounds about right.
Sure, why not? Again, you get more of that ambience. You get some more waves crashing on the beach. Again, to tie it into the album cover. And then maybe a first for the band. I know we've kind of run through these a few times, but acoustic guitar. There's like an acoustic guitar part on this track in particular. I don't believe out of all of the albums we've done thus far, I don't think I've ever heard any layers of acoustic instruments on the albums.
Did Derek play the acoustic guitar on this track?
He may have. I have him listed as doing backing vocals on The Prophets of Lost, drums and keyboards on The Burden of 7 Billion, but I don't. He may have. He may have done.
Definitely kind of seems more in his realm, especially with some of the stuff he did on Monolith and some of the other tracks on here. I mean, we have not heard acoustic guitar. We've heard clean guitar on a few tracks, but this is the first of an acoustic instrument. This track definitely has the vibe of almost setting up for the showdown, right? Almost setting up for the final battle of some sort. Definitely some first wave black metal vibes on this for sure. Very necro sounding stuff.
Yeah.
A la like Bathory, Celtic Frost, all the first wave black metal stuff that we remember.
Yeah, there was a kind of tied into another episode we've done with the Wild Hunt. There's like, there's a song on that particular album where there's almost like a someone speaking that just sounds kind of weathered, and it's almost like it's just like good storytelling.
That's the song The Wild Hunt.
Yeah, the title track. Yeah, I thought so, and it kind of reminded me of that. You just kind of have that very slow stage setting track, and from that aspect of it, there's some drums on here that just sound huge. There's some like really, really deep kind of reverb on that kick drum, and just the way that's being played, it just makes it sound very huge and kind of old, I guess. But
there's definitely the vibe of being on a boat.
Yes.
To tie it in with the water theme.
Yeah.
There's definitely a vibe of being on a ship and maybe going to entering into the eye of the storm, or leaving shore for the last time, or it's the last trip around the sun, whatever it may be. There's definitely that vibe of being weathered on this, and man, does it set you up for a motherfucker of a track. I will say this is a better ending track than Kingdom of Tyrants.
Fair enough.
And that's Pacific Grim, and it is shit. It's probably there's some really strong tracks on this album, but they definitely closed out with the fucking slobber knocker, to quote Jim Ross.
It's definitely maybe my favorite track on the record. Breakdowns aplenty.
Yes.
There's a bass break on the record that sounds nasty as shit. I love it. It's wonderful.
Is that the one that's got the almost sounds like chords being sustained?
Yeah, Derek played his ass off on this record for sure. There's some great chugging by Josh Elmore on this particular song as well. We also have a guest vocal, like a guest maybe spoken word. Jürgen Bartsch
from Bethlehem.
Yeah, not to be confused with the serial killer apparently.
For those who are fans of black metal that are listening to this, listen to Bethlehem, but make sure you've had a B12 shot. Make sure you've got vitamin D in your system. Make sure it's a nice day out. man, that's some depressing shit. But it is so fucking good. It has some of the wildest vocals I've ever heard on anything, which is a big influence on Travis.
He's just kind of doing a spoken word part. I'm assuming speaking in German, but it's there. It's a good little nod, good little guest appearance. But really, a strong ending track again that just culminates into what the record is about.
And how do we fade out on the album again?
With some more waves crashing down.
Waves.
Obviously, we touched on some of the reception from this record in particular. The band's first album to chart on the US Billboard 200 at number 100. It also appeared on number 44 of the top albums chart as well, which it's just a feat in general. I mean, really, to be a band, as I mentioned, for this long, and to be an extreme band at that and make it on the charts, maybe that doesn't mean quite as much to anyone anymore, even by this time. But I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's not a feat to ever be swept under the rug. It's something that could definitely happen and can still happen now, but they're just not viewed the same. So what we're going to discuss in the next episode is obviously the difference that 4 years brings with charts and success and all of that. And it's also going to show the difference of what like album promotion and everything does. And like, we're also going to touch on what touring differences happen, right? Obviously this band toured again. This is a touring band. They may disappear for a few years at a time when they're about to put out a record. But what you don't know is they're riding, because I have a feeling this band does not ride on the road. This band writes when they get home, and probably so they can focus a bit more on what they're writing, because these are dense songs. There's not a single song since probably Karma Bloody Karma that is just like, yeah, we wrote this track. These songs are well thought out and methodical. And the touring on this album definitely hits pretty hard. I mean, you've got another bit of a Phil Anselmo tie in here. You've got they did an American tour with King Parrot, who is on Housecore Records, Black Crown Initiate, and Dark Sermon. Both of those bands, I believe, were on E1 Records at the time, which is now Monarch Heavy, which typically puts out Crowbar stuff, as well as High on Fire stuff. So those are two.
Yeah, that's they did the latest Creeping Death record as well.
Yep, they sure did. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, they absolutely did. They also did a tour with let's face it, it's the biggest and best death metal band on the planet. They did a tour with Cannibal Corpse.
Yep.
And I'm assuming they shared co-opener status with another great technical band called Surreption, which on Surreption's album from 2018, Travis Ryan does a great guest vocal spot on one of the last tracks on the album. And then they did a southern tour with a Florida band called Abiotic. So they did a lot of touring. I believe on the touring cycle for this album might have been their first Australian tour or their first UK tour, because there's a video kind of blog of them going into England, and I believe they step off the bus and knock one of their scrims straight into like a canal.
Yeah, it doesn't start very great. I think that's like 2017. So yeah, I definitely maybe we'll get into that a little more on the next episode as well. Just kind of the in between from this record, the Anthropocene Extinction, going into Death Atlas, and then ultimately our latest record, Terracite. I love what we've done so far. We're almost near the end of our very long journey, but what a journey it's been.
It's been something. Doing these deep dives really helps you get an understanding of, how a band starts, where a band is at, or how a band ends, whichever, different eras. You can kind of break down this band's catalog into probably 3 to 4 different eras. You've got the very first kind of very like underground grind DIY side, and then you've got this kind of weirdly technical side, and then you get to this really developed atmospheric blackened elements with the 2 records we talked on today. And then you end up with I'm going to go ahead and say it, we'll touch on it in the Death Atlas portion, but that's the band's Black album to me. That is the band's album that you could put on any single track and go like, fuck, this thing could, This thing could have been on like, Sirius XM or anything like that. Any track on that album could. And, aside from, thank God they didn't have a Nothing Else Matters on that record, thankfully. But it just shows that these deep dives are really fun. Yeah, we've put in a lot of work with these, but it also gives a better appreciation of what we do and why we dig into bands like this, because bands like this deserve to have more recognition, I think. The Cannibal Corpses, the Deaths, the Morbid Angels, the Suffocations are always going to be lauded, but we need to be able to laud the modern bands that are out and not just go, oh, it's not Blessed Are the Sick, it's not the Bleeding, like, it's not death metal anymore. It's like, come on, man. There are some rad bands out there, and this might be one of the best ones out there. And again, we said this at the last episode. If this band would have ended after the Anthropocene extinction, shit. I mean, what a career. What a career, but they decided to keep going.
All right, we've reached that part of the episode where we like to recommend some things we've been listening to as of late. A couple things that I have on my list for this week is the new Gravesend track, the title track from their upcoming record, Guana's Death Stomp, that'll be out through $20 Spin, perhaps one of the best labels in underground extreme music at the moment, October 27th.
I think I saw today that someone compared $20 Spin as being the A24 of like underground metal labels, which I thought was perfect.
I mean, really though, if anything, kind of like an A24 movie, even if it's decent, I'm gonna check it out. Like, I just trust what they've got going on over there, and usually whatever they put out is worth listening to. I was a really big fan of their last record, Methods of Human Disposal. I believe that's titled from 2021. I've said it before. I'm pretty sure this band has some ties to Magruder Grind as well, but this is a 3-piece kind of blackened death metal project. They've released one single already. They kind of came through. They did like a small tour with another band called Contusion, which also features a previous member of Magruder Grind as well. But I'm really looking forward to this record. It's grimy, it's gross, it's heavy, and this newest title track that was released last week, it's perfect.
That band always reminds me, and for no reason, because these bands sound completely different, but it makes me think of that Pissgrave band a lot for whatever reason.
That makes sense for sure. My next recommendation, there's a handful of singles out for the latest upcoming Harm's Way album that will be out this Friday. Common Suffering, going to be out on the 29th for Metal Blade Records. There's been some great tracks released already. The latest one, probably, I guess the last single released for this record was with King Woman, Chris Esposito.
That's a wild one.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love all the King Woman stuff. I think it's great. If you haven't checked that out, you should definitely do so. But a really great guest spot vocals on this track. There's a great video for it out as well.
Is that the one where they're hanging upside down?
They are. They released some, at least photos kind of showing some behind the scenes stuff from that. It's definitely really great. And I think band's been working hard. It's been like 6 years since their last record, Posthuman, also on Metal Blade Records. But I'm really excited for this Friday to really just hear everything. But you can check those singles out now. Another recommendation I have, a full-length debut that's going to be coming out right here within the Chicago suburbs where I'm located, Parasite by Stomach, 2-piece kind of sludge doom metal project. Going to be dropping on October 20th. They have a couple singles out now, Ocular Migraine, Midnight in Pain. Features some members of Weekend Nachos, Sick Tired, just kind of some great hardcore bands from the area. They're going to be playing a show. We're recording this on a Terminator timeline, so I've either been to the show by this point or I'll talk about it in the next episode. But they're opening for Crowbar at Reggie's, and I'm very excited to go see that show.
Is that the Crowbar Primitive Man tour?
It is. Yep.
Ooh, with what? Body Box?
Body Box. I'm not familiar with that band, but I've obviously seen Crowbar before.
Yep.
Seen Primitive Man before. Both obviously one of some of the heaviest bands of all time.
I'm still hurting from the last time I saw that band.
To witness Stomach opening for Crowbar is going to be really, really great. And speaking of like the Harm's Way Stomach tie-in, Harm's Way announced that they're going to be doing a kind of release show in Chicago on November 18th at the Metro. And so they'll have like a couple bands from their tour that they're going on. I want to say Ingrown's going to be playing that set. But then they announced that Weekend Nachos is going to be playing some shows in 2024, as well as this show, kind of towards the tail end of the year, this release show. And, I was at their last 2 shows at the Subterranean in Chicago, and that was some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen. It was so chaotic in there, but the fact that they're back, it's been like 7 years playing this show.
Shit, it has.
Yeah. And
it really has.
It's really going to be a great night in Chicago. So if you're around, I would highly recommend checking that out.
I want to touch on Weekend Nachos because our mutual friend Nick Ray showed them to me, and obviously the first track I heard from them was Old Friends Don't Mean Shit.
Yep.
He introduced them to me, and I don't know if that's how you got into them, or maybe you just got through the Chicago tie-in. But I had a lot of fun listening to that band. A lot. You can listen to their full catalog in like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It's just great records. What is it? Is it Worthless that has that great pull out, and it's like the John Lennon Yoko Ono
yes,
thing?
It sure does.
That's so great. But what I hate wearing white shirts because I always massacre them. Like I've got like a CM Punk shirt that's a ringer, but like I barely wear it out because God forbid. But I love Chicago, always will. Pepsi feels the best. But I remember distinctly owning that awful Weekend Nacho shirt with the red lettering on it that said "Destroy the Christian Reich" on the back, and it was like a Christian metalcore band playing. And I would just wear that to upset people.
It's the 2 members of the band on the back. I have the same shirt.
I thought it was like some Christian metalcore band. I was like, that's even better.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. No, they
the Freddy Krueger one was my favorite shirt.
I have that one. I have a Sun ripoff shirt. I have a few things for sure. I have one that's a Portillo's like kind of rip off of the font.
Right. That's up. I remember that's up there with like my cattle Waffle House shirt.
Absolutely. It's perfect.
Talking about good merch, I know we're kind of vamping here, but when Rivers of Nile first like started touring nationally, they put out a Sierra Nevada rip shirt that I wish I would have jumped on.
Oh man,
but Dill was real broke back then. But hopefully that band puts out more merch because I doubt I'm going to get to see them in any form because of where I live. But I would love to have like a bigger merch selection from that band would be great. But I digress. I'm stomping all over what you're talking about.
No, I'm sure when that show comes around, I'm definitely going to be. My pocket's gonna have some holes in them that night.
Gonna hurt.
My last rec, an older record, or at least a little bit of an older record, I suppose. Clearing the Path to Ascend by Yob. It's perhaps one of my favorite records by that band.
Yes.
My introduction to that band in particular. Honestly, I really love just kind of putting it on in the morning because I feel like you can really kind of sit with it and meditate with it a little bit.
I was going to bring up, it's very meditative.
Put on those like noise canceling headphones and just kind of have a coffee with it. I love that record. I'm currently in the midst of a move. So I was going through some of my records and I found that. And every time I come across it, I always put it on. So those are my recs. Dylan, what do you have for me this weekend, bud?
We're talking about Terminator timelines here. So at present time, whenever this airs, who knows, I will either be about to go see the Mighty Cannibal Corpse, or I have just seen the Mighty Cannibal Corpse on a massive tour that they're on, which would be Cannibal Corpse, Mayhem, Gore Guts, and Blood Incantation. Also, depending when this releases and what timeline we're in, I prefer the one where John Connor dies. The newest Cannibal Corpse album, Chaos Horrific, will have dropped. I've definitely been listening to the 2 singles that have dropped for that, Summon for Sacrifice, Bloodbind. It definitely sounds like Eric Rutan has found his niche within the band. He was already an unofficial 6th member of the band. Alex and the guys are going to put out a great record. This band never misses. They never pull punches. Definitely look out for Chaos Horrific. I also want to go with the, I don't remember what band some of the members of this band were in. I feel like it was Ludacra, I think they were in, or possibly one of the kind of California black metal bands. But Relapse is putting out an album by a group called The Keening, and the album is called Little Bird. And the 2 tracks that I've released from that are really bleak and just amazing. That would be the tracks Autumn and Little Bird, which is the title track. Really long tracks, but you can put it on and just kind of zone out and just have a great time with it. And then a couple older ones, in doing research for our podcast here, we wanted to hit some contemporary records. So that I just went through my record collection. Like, I need to listen to this. It's been a while. The debut Ghost album, Opus Eponymous. It's been a long time since I've listened to that record, and to see where that band has gone from that record to an arena-filling, like genre-defying band, Opus Eponymous was great. I remember doing my first tour, and I listened to that album on repeat on my first tour. I would go to sleep to it. I would wake up to it. I would just put it on my iPod Classic and just let it repeat over and over again. So like songs like Ritual, Elizabeth, those tracks just are ingrained in me. And it's such a great image. I don't care how schlocky it's gotten later on. Bring that shit on. It's like a 70s like Hammer film. And on the more aggressive side, I went back and listened to the first Goatwhore record I ever heard, which was 2006's A Haunting Curse. It is their Metal Blade debut album. It has the track Alchemy of the Black Sun Cult. I heard this album and heard the riffs on it and heard the vocals from Ben Falgo. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And it didn't dawn on me that this was before I knew anything about like the New Orleans scene or the sludge scene. And these guys to me are kind of an outlier. They're almost too blackened for the sludge scene, but they're almost too sludge for the black metal scene. I mean, these guys are fucking great. Every record they've put out has been a banger. You and I got the opportunity to see them on their record release show at the Exit Inn in like 2014, maybe. It was right after you had moved back. We've got a long tie-in with like all the New Orleans bands because we're both big fans of those bands so much. And this band to me doesn't get a lot of credit because they're kind of in that, they started to take off kind of in that later 2000 era. But I think as long as they've been going on and the stellar records they've been putting out, this band needs to be rethought of in that upper echelon of like I Hate God, Crowbar, all of those bands. They should be up there with those bands because of their longevity. I believe they're going on tour, or they're constantly on tour is kind of the thing with this band. They just recently did an episode of the Garza podcast, which you and I are pretty good fans of. He's had some really cool interviews on there. But definitely check out this record if you've never checked it out. Check out any Goatwhore record. None of them are bad. They're all rad. It sounds like first wave black metal meets like, hardcore and sludge from New Orleans. Go to a crawfish broil, listen to Goatwhore, have fun with the shit.
Well, that's it for the week. We'll be back next week talking about a couple more albums in the Cattle Decapitation discography, our last 2 records. You can always follow us for any updates on the show at Distortion891, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We also have a Riffs on Repeat playlist that you can check out if you ever get bored. Always updated each week for you to enjoy. But until then, we'll see you next time.
Ba-ba-bow.